You in the shadows.
Welcome back to HGC North America. Currently, Tempo, Storm, and Roll20 are tied 1-1, and I'm sure you would have it no other way. We'd have it no other way. The rivalry between these two teams continues. If you're just joining us, this is such an important match. Because both teams are 3-2 in standings, it is very likely that the team who loses today just cannot compete for the Western Clash. But the hopes stay alive for the one that wins.
Yeah, and even then it's not concrete, right?
Right.
That's one of the more awkward moments of this is like, yeah, they have better odds and still stand a chance. It's like you can knock one out, be the gatekeeper, and kind of cut them out of the race, but you still are not insured it for yourself. You need to be able to win out the rest of the season, and also considering the results of teams like No Tomorrow and Gale Force Esports.
Right, everybody has lost series. There's nobody like the Fnatic in Europe who just hasn't lost a single series. Everyone has lost, and because a lot of times they've lost to each other, there's a lot of circles happening, and so it's very convoluted trying to figure out. But the one thing we do know is that if Roll20 wins today over Tempo Storm, Team Freedom will qualify for the Western Clash. Up next, Game 3, the battleground is going to be Shire, chosen by Tempo Storm.
Interesting choice for Tempo to move into Shire. Not typically a map that you look at for them and be like, you know, their go-to, but they have picked it up a little bit more frequently. I believe we've seen them pick it at least, you know, at least against Superstars, it was their first pick, but then up until that point, though, we had only seen it one time that they were like, Tempo has now picked up the Shire.
It's weird that where we started in Phase 2 to where we've gotten to again, the map favorite seems to be changing as much as who is in the lead in our standings. Even yesterday, Roll20 picked Shire versus Team Freedom, and both teams like to play the Stitches, Kael'thas, Death compositions. Only one team can end up drafting them, so we'll have to see who gets it. Yeah,
and you know, Kael'thas isn't enough of a tool kind of on his own in most compositions to be like, well, at least we can deny one. It's more of like, you get the Stitches or you don't. And then is the KT too big of a threat into the secondary ban phase. Well, here it is. Roll20 is going to be kicking it off on Shire with an Uther ban.
Tassadar, a quick and easy follow for Tempo to take away.
Is it Genji or is it Dahaka here? Or do we go with something, again, like the Stitches, the Anubarak, higher priority heroes here for Roll20? They have to answer the question. They haven't been as on the Dahaka hype train as much as they've been in the past. I guess that's not true. I feel like they've been, I might be wrong about that. I feel like they have prioritized it so very highly, or the Grey Main.
Yeah, they picked it first pick, but they were in the second pick position twice yesterday.
Yeah.
On Shire, they chose it with Stitches, but then later on they paired it with Malthael and were able to have a 2-3 with the 2 of Dahaka and Malthael up at the top, and then the 3 had the Stitches, Kael'thas to rotate back, and Malfurion as well to rotate between the mid and bottom. There's a lot of
I love this.
A lot of picks they would like to have here.
Yeah,
but they only get one.
See, what you do in these circumstances, you really just go, I know I'm going to get 3 out of the 5, right? Out of the first hero is going to be selected. You just go, what of those 3 are the most important and which deny the synergy of the 2 you assume Tempo is going to be positioning? That's why often you see like the Ariel Tass or the Ariel Vola is because you get the overly synergistic rather than maybe what is the objective singular power because you know it is in fact denied. Roll20, they concede over to the Dahaka route there, but they still have the opportunity to move and transition towards that Malthael as you were talking about. They did yesterday.
Another note about Tempo Storm on Shire is versus Superstars. They drafted Tychus later on. It may be something that they want to get again to make sure that they're able to actually siege down structures once they get 10 with Odin, if they're able to get a Dragon Knight too. So it's not as easy to stall out a game into the later game, and that did enable them to win earlier on in what we would consider early for a Shire game. But Stitches and Genji were still up, and Tempo Storm will take both.
Now my question is, does Roll20 pick up the Malfurion in this transition? Because we know Roll20 has been comfortable playing Medivh on a map like Shire, and again, the Malfurion, Dahaka are kind of key elements that they really enjoy being able to pick up the hero whenever they have those. At least it was way more before Mid-Season Brawl and through and slightly after. Recently, again, with the TAS involvement and such, they have shifted a little bit away from that. But it is something now that they could try and abuse because it denies the Malfurion synergy if they wanted to from the Stitches. And now they have the option to ban it out and say they go with the Ariel, they go with the Anubarak. It's more rinse and repeat. It's nice to have the Ariel on a smaller map too. Again, the laning pressure. Shire is all about lanes. It's the most lane-focused map in the game.
yeah, we can clearly see where Roll20 wants to go with their draft, as can Tempo Storm. They don't want to allow Medivh once again for Roll20 as a sort of secondary support and make an unkillable composition. Does Roll20 now ban Malfurion? Is there anything else that you could see? It's just such a good follow-up for Stitches.
I feel like I wouldn't be surprised if it's not the Malfurion, is how I would put it, but I do really enjoy the Malfurion above all else because the Uther ban, because of the pickup onto the Ariel. Tassadar has been removed as well. I mean, it really makes it to where Tempo is already committed to the Stitches, and there's not much they can do after the Malfurion's removed, because he suddenly is the only hard CC support remaining, and that it decentivizes things like the Kael'thas, so suddenly it's not impossible, but way less effective. It hits 3 heroes in one ban, and so I think it, cost-effective-wise, was the smartest choice Roll20 could have made, and they ended up locking that in. So now it really decentivized a lot of picks that Tempo wanted.
Tempo still needed a solo laner, so they'll add Arthas. They get Rhaegar as their support, making sure that they have the big ancestral heal for Genji. But Arthas will be the laner up in the top for Fury.
So what do we see Roll20 want to move into? They already got the Ariel. I'm assuming we're going to get ourselves a Vola somewhere in here. It's just what else do they move with? Is it another attempt at trying to bring in the support? It's not necessarily Roll20's style that heavily. They have been, again, they are interesting in like all the elements towards common compositions. They're okay not over-focusing on the synergy, which is, again, not something you would typically say about teams that Glorong has played in the past, which is so cool to see the development here.
Lunara and Brightwing.
So they go for the double support. Interesting.
And Lunara over Vala. What do you think about that choice?
I enjoy Lunara into Genji, mainly. Whenever we get the Genji picked up on the other side, you just go like, well, can I get away with the Lunara? If the answer is yes, I do enjoy that pickup. And Abathur locked in for Tempo Storm. Not a common pick we see in Dragonshire, especially in North America. I want to argue we have not seen a single Dragonshire Abathur in all of HGC North America. Have we?
I don't know.
I can tell you all of Phase 1 it never happened. If it happened in Phase number 2, I can't recall off the top of my head.
Yeah,
So,
it would take a little
adjustment.
bit of time to go through all of the drafts of HGC that we have.
Just the fact that we don't, like, that I can even get close to thinking that shows how insanely rare this pick is for Tempo Storm. It adds up to their comp. It's just that their comp doesn't add up to the map, right? And so now it suddenly can Roll20 abuse the variables that they have drafted towards that, like the Ariel, like the Dahaka we talked about. They picked that in before the secondary ban phase, and they just used the rest to not totally suck. Brightwing slightly accents the map on top of it. This is very... Tempo has an amazing composition. It's just, can they work it on a map like Dragonshire?
Yeah, does Tempo Storm take too much damage earlier on because of that Abathur pick? Can Roll20 do the damage that they need to do so that Abathur doesn't start to skyrocket the game in Tempo Storm's favor later on? Or are Tempo able to withstand that early pressure of the Lunara with the double support? Let's talk about the double support. Where do you think Brightwing is going to fit in the laning phase? You think it's going to be a 2 up at the top with the double global and then Brightwing phase shifting where she's needed, or kind of going back and forth around where she's maybe called to assist?
I think that's going to be a lot of the focus. It's going to be Ariel, Lunara, and Brightwing are the 3, and then we see kind of Dahaka on an island. Brightwing might be able to go up there and help if needed. I think a noob will probably be the babying of the Dahaka, make sure he doesn't get wrecked too hard, but Brightwing will always be the on-call, if you will, whenever stuff really seems to be hitting the fan, especially post-7.
I think we can definitely expect a lightning bond for Rhaegar to try to deal with the wave clear. We'll have to see. Let's get into Dragonshire for game number 3 between these two teams. I say lightning bomb, but we have had so many Wolf Run picks as of late, specifically this weekend.
I don't see a major argument as the value to get a Wolf Run in this style of comp. Like, into Stitches, I never mind like going into, you know, the Wolf Run, but there's no other major variable on the other side. The only argument you could make is if you're needed that heavily to transition towards top and baby them. But we've also had far less rigid, I guess, laning structures for North America, which kind of, you know, could be justification for that adjustment in talents.
Well, June is still thinking about it. We do have Eternal Hunger once again, so Arthas will be stacking up his damage as well as, to a certain point, his mana return from Frostborn Hungers. Roll20 has shown in the bottom, trying to siege down some of those towers earlier on, and the rotation from Tempo Storm's coming in to stop it. The hook goes down, and Goku's caught, but he'll turn around and say, I can do that too.
There's a lot of CC still left. Justin, I think, has the impale. He's going to use it maybe a bit too late. Brightling coming in for the teleport. The heal is enough. Polymorph there, and Buds saves the members of Roll20, but that was not the opener that we expected, that Roll20 was expecting at all. You know, it was kind of just testing the waters a smidge, not committing rotations. They wanted just to see if they could draw Tempo to making a misplay and then abusing their double globals. And Tempo forced them to do it the other way around. The global is responding to them.
Yeah, the global came in because Roll20 very nearly lost Justin in that siege earlier on, but now things are stabilizing. Roll20 has Brightwing hanging out in mid, so they have their two globals, Dahaka in top, Brightwing in the mid. So that either one can respond if they're needed or try to come in if they see somebody available, somebody stepping too far out. For instance, Arthas potentially up at the top. If there's a drag that comes in, Brightwing can try to help out with that too. Or even a Genji if we start to see Genji go up more so to the top lane. Speaking of Brightwing though, Genji will take her out in the mid.
Yeah, Brightwing very, very vulnerable to kills early parts of the game. I talk about that a lot when we see her as a hero because a lot of people forget she's just got no mount. You hear the word global and you're like, that's really awesome. But when you look at how squishy her HP pool is and the fact that she never has the opportunity to mount up, that means every brush is a death zone for this hero. So much so that I would actually like to see them pull her down to bottom. The area to be able to get a gank onto the Brightwing is very predictable if she's in the bottom lane. Not so much when you've got the Bermuda Death Triangle, two different shrubs above you, sitting right next to the shrine in mid. It just would benefit the three-man of Roll20 that much more, and it would also mitigate the vulnerability of Brightwing as much as possible.
You know, the nice thing for Tempo Storm, they did end up taking Lightning Bond for the extra clear, but it's not like there's a ton of wave clear over on the other side for Roll20 either. They have Ariel, who will do a lot, especially now that she has Majestic Span and has the cooldown reduction if there are heroes that she could hit with her Sacred Sweep. But Glaurung is just trying to put his poison down as much as he can. They have an Arcane Flare for Buds too, so Tempo Storm, in having Stitches with the Slam build, is doing a great job of mitigating whatever pressure Roll20 has been able to do so far.
Yeah, it's actually insane. The fact that they were able to back out, get a Giants, and 0 front walls taken down. Now Glaurung getting just bodied there by the Abathur Hat with Psalm initiating in. Just Lunara cannot keep up with that initiation. Good juke there from Buds, but it almost cost him his life. Psalm goes over. He goes in, he goes out. That is now another kill for Tempo Storm. 3-0 so far. But Roll20, they're rebuttaling. They find themselves a Fury who's about to be out of mana. And suddenly that slow is not going to be able to outrun that passive helping hand, though.
Yeah, he's going to get there for the helping hand. Cattle immediately started to rotate up. These rotations from Tempo Storm are crisp. And Psalm with the flashy plays, able to dive back behind and get the kill on Brightwing too. Tempo Storm are making this highly mobile composition work for them in the early game.
They very much are, and it's showing. Just look at some of the numbers here. I mean, this is suddenly a terrifying game when you look at the numbers. It's almost a full level lead, 3-0 when it comes to the kills, and it's an Abathur on the other side of the table. Abathur is going to be able to provide a really nice stall to the later stages of this game. He's going to be able to amplify the middle parts of the Dragonite, and the fact that Roll20 had picked an early game laning focus composition, and they're struggling into a Abathur comp is actually worst case scenario.
Well, two nice things for Roll20, even though they are struggling against the late game composition. And as they lose their Justin.
Nice attainment.
Beautiful detainment strike though, but there's still a deflect, still a heal from June 2, and he will get Psalm out. There is the late game factor of Lunara and her poisons, as well as the Apex Predator for Dahaka. But man, Roll20 have lost so much early on here. 5 kills to 0 for Tempo Storm.
Yeah, Roll20 just again, but without having that pressure early on, and then Tempo has got such an insane brawling composition between the Genji, Arthas, Abathur, and we haven't even got to begin to see what double Genji is going to be able to do here against Roll20. Now, this game plays out a little bit different. Abathur on Shire suddenly makes every Dragon Knight not matter, at least up until they are very, very impactful. So suddenly, Fury, why he's stalling, is the same reason you normally would, where it's like, it's not going to be able to gain that much, but you want Abathur to try and get the soak elsewhere, get the pressure grouped up. I would like to see Tempo commit as a 4, have Abathur get those side 2, but other than that, this is really smart to play it slow to only further their lead.
They have been able to push this wave up to the tower.
Nice
so
hook.
Luna in. Hook again connects on Glaurung. Assam immediately dives in for the kill. He'll get it. Lunara goes down. Tempo Storm getting dangerously close to heroic abilities while Roll20 has just now hit level 8.
They're just bodying Roll20, honestly. Cattle just hits a hook, then you die. It's almost like I've seen this before. You know what I mean? It's just time and time again. The Howling Blast with Genji's initiation, having the Abathur hat. They don't, I mean, it's even nice that they got one of the more offensive supports in the game up until Stukov drops down to be able to back up that follow-up. Roll20, specifically Glaurung,
they gotta stop getting hooked.
He's got to stop, like, you know that sweet galloping that we were talking about that like hurts my eyes a little bit on the inside every time she's going around? We need to be using that away from the hooks, not into them. Early on, he let hooks hit him intentionally, and I felt like that was a really smart thing because most of the time they didn't actually have kill potential. I don't know who I got to talk to, but it is now post-10. It's in the later stages, and there's a huge experience gap. We can't have this anymore if Roll20 wants to even stand a chance in this game. At this point, Tempo Storm, I wouldn't be surprised if they end this before like 12 minutes. It's just like a pre-20 game on Dragonshire. That's almost unheard of.
Yeah, a 2-level lead this early on a game is not something that happens very often. And now there's not just hooks, there's Gorges as well. There's the displacement of that. There's double Genjis, there's Dragon Blade. Roll20 needs to get heroic abilities. And yeah, when you have this, oh, nice dodge there from Goku. When you have this Vala Ariel secondary support composition, sometimes you will see the ranged player make sure that they're the one who gets the hook.
Yeah.
But that's generally when it's Vala and you can vault away.
Yeah, and it's also like when the secondary support has a major burst heal that doesn't force the Ariel to burn all her hope. I don't know if anybody knew this, but we picked our second support to be a Brightwing, and she struggles in that department. Ask me if a Brightwing wants to blink heal into an Arthas. The answer is not a single chance in the entire world. So much so, she's going to go in the Emerald Wind. Now, trying to get the peel, the isolation makes sense because of the lack of mobility between Arthas and Stitches, but whether or not she's realistically going to be able to get one off, and even if she does, gets it off before somebody dies, I feel like this is a very overly optimistic perspective on how to approach team fights for Roll20.
Well, importantly for Roll20, they got heroic abilities before they got into a big engagement with Dragon Blade. But now they need to get into the fight because they are falling further and further behind those talent tiers. Tempo Storm will hit a hook, but they're playing it slowly. They just want to make sure that they can get 13 and get, once again, ahead in a talent tier over Roll20.
Huge victory up here in the top lane. The fact that Tempo's able to open up this map more and more is going to make Abathur that much more intimidating. And that's kind of like, it's the struggle of Abathur and Dragonshire. Dragonshire is a small map, so typically Abathur doesn't work. You know how Sky's a big map, but Abathur doesn't work because of how easy the structures go down? Abathur works on Dragonshire because how slow the structures move. The fact that Tempo is able to take that top 4, and they didn't lose anything on bottom, Abathur's like, I've hit the 13 mark, I'm ready to just become an absolute monster.
Nobody can help Glaurung get away from this double Genji. Kothan already has taken out the first. They've got isolation, but it's just going to be dealing with the clone that they had with the Emerald Wind. Now Prismaticism comes out, goes down. Tempo Storm only losing the clone in that. A few heroic abilities will be able to convert the bottom shrine to blue and try to pick up yet another Dragon Knight.
Dragon Knight number 2 is going to be online. The checklist is going through. Tempo is now, it's that 2 3/4. They're going to move up to this mid fort. Fury is inside of this, but that really is not a major setback. Tempo doesn't have anybody who is a very must-have, must-don't. It kind of is just really heroic based, and they find themselves the final fort remaining for Roll20 here up in mid.
Last fort goes down. Tempo Storm move to the bottom towers, trying to take out the keep towers so they can get the experience off of that and open up that keep for further pressure. Off the back of this, they can look to get the 3 mercenary camps that are in this, especially since Roll20 still hasn't been able to get 13. Roll20, again, are running out of options. They know they're going to have to get into some sort of fight that may be not advantageous to them just because they are that far behind, 9 kills to 0.
Yeah, and you saw for a moment that Roll20 was posturing, questioning if they wanted to try and take a fight post that Dragon Knight. Glaurung got the poison out. He was looking to be able to get that slow and kind of push it forward. That is the only fight that Roll20 is going to get at pre-16. So much so, Fury legitimately just dancing the Dragon Knight in front of him. Just going like, you need this to be able to go down. We know that this is the only fight you need, and it's not going to happen. Back out, get the Giants 16 talents here, full 3-level lead. Tempo is just looking for keeps now.
16 comes in, and again, we have the Arthas build that we saw Justing play before. This time it is played by Fury. So now with Frostborn Feats, he has the double Frostborn Hungers, and pairing that with the cooldown reduction as well as the 50% slow with Frost Strike at 13, and then the stacks that he's been able to get at Eternal Hunger. He's just sitting at 9 stacks right now, hitting heroes, but later on, the later this game goes, the better things get for him with those. The ability to do a lot of damage, chunk down the health bars, and be another damage dealer for the team.
Fury just zoning off the members of Roll20. Look at the clone just moving up there, Kothin getting so much pressure, forcing the Aegis onto Ariel, and then the real Genji saw him, goes in, just immediately gets the explosion. First kill available for Tempo. Prismat's going to be the second. I would not be surprised if there was a third. Look at June's even getting the track down there. He's got the hat. He is Battle Rhaegar, and that is how you 1v1 his supports. Totally balanced. And Tempo now is going to be able to get themselves a keep. There
were two kinds of slows there. Earth Grasp Totem as well as the slow off of Envenomed Spikes from Abathur. June knew that he'd be able to get the kill from there, and he did. The respawn timers are fairly low, but still a lot of heroic abilities have already been used from Roll20, and Tempo Storm with a 4-level lead is hoping to just end the game right here before 12 minutes, take out this, and move on to what could be the last game for them in this series.
Yeah, and they very much are going to be able to make it happen. Tempo Storm, in a very dominant fashion, will be able to clean up Roll20 here in game number 3. Roll20 has got to be rethinking things after that last draft. I think it was pretty apparent that Tempo got a lot of very intimidating picks, very synergistic, so much so that we questioned, you know, is Roll20 going to be able to abuse their laning early on? They very much didn't. I feel like a lot of that came down to, you were asking me, what do you think the laning phase is going to be? You can't leave Brightwing on her own. Like, just flat out. There's no world where Brightwing as a solo laner is a justifiable pick in my mind, and a lot of that was why Tempo was able to pull ahead. I'm glad to see that Tempo picked the risk in terms of the comp, not adjusting to the map and abusing every hole whenever Roll20 presented it.
Yeah, Stitch's Genji turns out is a very powerful 2 heroes to be able to pick in one rotation. But honestly, Roll20 had far too many picks early on in that game that put them way too far behind. A 2-level lead that early on a game does not happen often.
On Dragonshire of all maps, like that's the thing, is Dragonshire is a map that because the structures work so slow and because the lanes are so tight together, ganks don't happen. Like Dragonshire is a map where oftentimes ganks only happen because the laning phase exists for so long, not because real ganks are going through like on other maps. So it is unheard of. Like it's not just like a 2-level lead that early on. Big deal. Now on Dragonshire, I just go, are you playing with like your feet? What's going on?
Versus an Abathur composition too.
Yeah.
Yeah, things did not turn out as planned, definitely from Roll20, and that was very evident earlier on. And there was a tweet from Glowering yesterday after they lost versus Team Freedom, talking about how he didn't feel like he played up to his full performance. And now it feels like, again, Roll20 is dealing with some sort of issue, whether it is just having an off weekend. As we've seen before, though, off weekends, when you play against 2 very good opponents, are devastating for a team. And there's no team that can better explain that to Roll20 than Tempo Storm themselves, losing to both Gale Force and No Tomorrow in one weekend.
Yeah, and it's very weird to now experience what's kind of going on, you know, with the actual map or with the actual game itself here, because like Tempo Storm has been the team who had the slight recover, and then Roll20 did the slow stoop down. Are they going to rise back up? And Tempo right now, they are definitely playing better and seeing that growth.
Yeah.
But Roll20, I also feel like is definitely not getting that ascension upward like they kind of claimed they would be able to ride that wave of excitement and momentum as a group.
Yeah, make no mistake, Tempo Storm is playing out of their minds with the plays that they've been able to make so far, and that has put them 1 game away from being able to win this series. We're headed into game number 4 now. That game will take place on Battlefield of Eternity, and Roll20 has given up first pick.